wanted to welcome everyone. I appreciate your time, and I'm so glad that you're going to come and listen to Abraham speak on building resilience. The workshop is being sponsored by the School of Nursing, who received the GLS grant for suicide prevention on campus. So a little bit about Abraham. Actually, there's a lot about Abraham. Abraham Scully is a mental health educational consultant and a best-selling author dedicated to empowering students, educators, and educational institutions. Has a focus on maximizing student success and promoting positive learning environment. Abraham provides guidance and practical strategies that drive meaningful change. So with a personal journey marked by overcoming challenges and triumphing on adversities, Abraham brings a unique perspective to his work. Abraham's speaking engagements have been inspiring and have empowered countless individuals. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abraham.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for being here in person, and for those who are tuned in virtually, what's up? Thank y'all for being here. We do have attendees virtually and in person, so I will do my best to make sure everyone feels like they're included. If at any point you think I'm neglecting our virtual attendees, just say, hey, Abraham, remember we got some people online. Because unfortunately I can't see them, but I know they're here, they can hear us, and we can hear them. Thankfully, we have some tech assistants. So there will be portions during our workshop where I'll be asking questions where you can answer, as well as our virtual attendees. And if they choose to come off with mute, we get to engage with them even more. So thank you all for being here. Number one, I think it's important that we continue to have these conversations. And I'm very grateful for the School of Nursing here to prioritize these conversations and to ensure that not only are students getting the support that they need, but faculty and staff as well. Before I dive into today's workshop, I will preface that we are here from 1 to 4. So with that, we're going to cover, she's like, I'm ready to go. So with that, we're going to cover a whole lot, but I do understand that everyone has, different things going on. And so if at any point you do have to leave earlier, that's totally fine. Same for our virtual attendees, but if you are able to stay and engage, and we have a few activities which will allow us to collaborate with each other and learn from each other and engage, that you can do that for as long as you're able to. So, but no pressure if you have to go. And, you can feel free to just say bye, if you leave beforehand. I also want to see who's in the room and get an opportunity to learn a little bit about you. And let's make sure that my clicker is clicking. So if you can help me with our virtual attendees, I have a few questions that I would like to hear from those who are in person as well as virtually. Just your name, your role here at NMSU, and then what was the motivation behind attending this particular session? So I'm gonna volunteer someone, and then we'll do popcorn from there. Because I know everyone's excited to share, right? And we don't want to, talk over each other. Everyone just wants to share. So we'll do it that way. Popcorn, I will start with Ayan.
Hello, everyone. This is Ayan Asif, and I am working as a graduate research assistant at School of Nursing. And I think this workshop will really help me to change my perspective about mental health and my thinking process and all the stuff. And I think this is the right time to attend this workshop. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Welcome.
And who is your popcorn? Who are you gonna pick?
My name is Gina Marino. I'm a health ed specialist at the Aggie Health and Wellness Center, and I'm part of the nursing grant as a outreach coordinator. And I think this workshop just kind of falls under my category as far as building clients.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
My name is Joanne Rodriguez, and I am one of the counselors and one of the postdocs at IG Health and Wellness Services. And the reason why I decided to attend this session is because I think that it's a very important topic that could be useful right now in this era of my life.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. Who do you select?
Hello. My name is Callum Grievous. I'm a counselor at the Academic Center as well. I think right now, students that I work with, I think it's what we learn here can help benefit them, help teach them resilience. I'm really interested in the idea of grit and working through tough times, and not only with the students, but also day-to-day work life. How do I get through those days that I'm trying to just make it through, I suppose.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
But
My name is Vanessa. I'm one of, also, we're all counselors, so I'm also one of the counselors. I am excited to be here because when I saw Abraham's talk before at Active Minds, I thought he was a great speaker, so excited to see
Thank you.
him. And resiliency, such an important, I think no matter how much we talk about it, there's always something to learn about how we can talk about it together. So I'm excited to be here. I choose the last counselor. How do I guess?
My name is Elisa. I'm also a counselor at the health center, and reason why I'm here is that our clinical director highly recommended us attend, and also Vanessa had really wonderful words about you as a speaker.
Awesome.
And resiliency is one of the topics I enjoy learning about most.
Thank you for being here. I'm gonna take a quick pivot and come to our virtual attendees. Do we have anyone in the chat or anyone that would like to come off of mute and share?
Good one chat.
We have one chat.
Want to read it?
Can you?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
So this one's from Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
Speak louder. We're behind you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacy, and I serve as student program coordinator for the Skills and Simulation Center within the School of Nursing. I'm thrilled to be joining this session as mental health. I'm so sorry. Mental health holds immense significance for all of us, especially as we navigate the complexities of balancing our roles as students, parents, and employees. It's crucial that we remain accessible to students across all platforms to provide the support they require.
Awesome.
And then you have someone who's willing to go off.
All right, let's bring them on.
I don't know if they heard you.
What's it?
Matsu, what?
Matsubai, please come off of mute. I'd love to hear your answers to these questions.
Marie.
Marie.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You're good.
Thank you. I'm on the other side here of the audio. My name is Marie Zubiate. Just to kind of keep on with the role of our counselors here. I'm at the Aggie Health and Wellness Center. I'm also one of the counselors. As was already mentioned, we've heard really great things about Abraham as a speaker, so no pressure. But we have also been encouraged, as was mentioned by Elisa, from our director. It is a topic that we as counselors definitely come across a lot with our student population. And so just here to learn more about how we can assist in this area and look forward to seeing what we can learn.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we'll come back to the in-person room before we come back to the virtual. While we're getting responses from in-person, if you're tuning in virtually, please share your responses in the chat or put your raise hand feature and we'll come back over to you. So for our in-person, I think we landed on you. So can you popcorn someone?
Hi, my name is Kat.
Quite a click.
What'd you say?
Quite a click.
Right? I mean, they're here.
I think
and
if anyone outside of there.
After this, we're done, we promise.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
My name is Patsy Fotis, and I work the front desk at IG Health and Wellness Center. And the reason I decided to attend, because of being front desk, we get the hit of, I'm bringing in someone, they're suicidal, and I want to know how to
receive them, how to give them the resources. Because I don't want to deny anybody, I don't want to let them go, so I think it's beneficial for me to try to help them.
Yeah, and I'll go into that a little bit when I share my personal story. But you do have a significant role being the first face many times that students see. So thanks for being here. Who do you popcorn? Raise your hand if you didn't know yet.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
Well, my name is Jackie Williams. I'm an associate college professor in the School of Nursing. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner across the lifespan and a adult psychiatric clinical nurse specialist. And I had 3 reasons for coming to this workshop. First of all, enduring to the end is a personal challenge for all of us. So anything I can learn about resilience that helps me get up tomorrow and come back to work, it's a really big deal. And then secondly, I worked with the Department of Veterans Affairs for several years, for a decade, just a few years ago. And we had, of course, a huge push. I was stationed at Fort Bliss to try to influence the suicide rate of both the active duty soldiers and their families and those who returned from deployments, like our veterans and their families. And frankly, the programs didn't work. Our suicide rates kept rising in spite of these programs being designed with the best possible research by the most expert brains in the nation. We were not doing a good job of impacting it. So I'm always interested to see what people are trying next.
Yeah.
And then anything I can do to help students. We know that a single caring adult in the life of a high school child can make a difference for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Even if the adult doesn't know the student has latched onto them as a stabilizing force. So what we say and do with students can make a lifetime difference.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing that. Let's pivot back to virtual. Do we have anyone with their hand raised or anyone sharing the chat?
There are a lot in the chat.
There are a lot in the chat. If
Will
you
we
want
have
me to
one
help.
hand raised?
Okay, let's do the hand raise. And if you want me to help, I can read some of the chat as well. You want me to? Okay.
Yeah, I'm engineer.
No, okay, I got you. Let's do the hand raise. Who's the hand raise? What's their name?
Maria?
Maria.
Did we do that?
Is there another Maria?
I don't know. Maybe.
If you're the old one,
Maria, if you already have shared with us, you can put your hand. Mariah, that looks like Mariah.
Hi.
Hi, Mariah.
Hi there.
For us?
Hi, so my name is Mariah. I'm a practicum counselor at the Aggie Health and Wellness Center as well. And I work alongside my other counselors, assisting students in mental health and also sometimes, mentioning some of those factors of resilience and talking with students about suicidality. I decided to attend because I wanted to learn more about resilience, and I'm really looking forward to learning really anything to be able to support the students that we work with.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Mariah. So I see in the chat, we have Cindy. Hi, my name is Cindy Bulu. I am so sorry if I did not say that correctly. I am the program coordinator for the new nurse anesthesiology program within the School of Nursing. I'm attending because I want to be able to support the students in this highly competitive and stressful program. And then Jana Krieger. Hi, my name is Jana, and I'm a professor in the nursing program. I'm excited to learn more about how to help students be supportive and help them find the resources they need. Thank you, Jana. And Nikki Duran. Hi, my name is Nikki. I'm a counselor at Aggie Health and Wellness Center. I am fresh out of school, so my motivation for attending this workshop is to just obtain as much education as I can on how I can better support the students at NMSU. Thank you, Nikki. And Esther Lapite. Hi, my name is Esther Lapite. I am a pre-doctoral intern at the Aggie Health and Wellness Center. I'm here because I'm always looking for tools, interventions, and methods to support our students, and a topic about building and fostering resilience sounds like something they can greatly benefit from. So thank you for being here and for educating us. thank you all for being here and thank you for sharing. So we're gonna pivot back to in-person. Who are and you popped in, hello. Who do we have left as far as introductions? So I think you are,
I'm Sandra Perez. I am the Assistant Director for Student Success at the School of Nursing. And I am here to help my students in a very specific way. And I'm not sure if this is the topic for today, but resilience in the clinical setting when the situation that the student encounters reminds them of a trauma that they experienced earlier in their life. And the clinical setting is not the time for them to release all of the emotion that they have experienced, but I want to find a productive way for them to be able to contain that and then channel that into a productive conversation hours later, perhaps during post-conference.
yeah,
And so it's a short term, I need you to be resilient for 7 more hours and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's something you're going to be addressing today.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm looking for right now.
thank you for bringing awareness to it. Yeah, I think that's something that may be a shared experience across the board as far as who's represented here. So thanks for being here. Thank you for sharing. And then our final. Oh, no, we're going back to you, Connie. So we'll go in the back and then we'll come back to Connie. So if you could answer these questions. for us.
Sure, I'm Allison Hunt. I'm a college assistant professor in the School of Nursing. I'm also a pediatric nurse practitioner clinically. So my desire to be here is twofold. One is for students, for building resiliency, and then the other is that, in particular, the adolescent patients that I see in the clinic. So just to learn more.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go 1, 2, 3. They tried to hide.
So I'm Juanita Blake. I'm an associate professor at the the School of Nursing. And I teach in a lot of different classes, but I have some mental health background as well in my classes. And I'm here because I'm always wanting to learn about resiliency, how to make things successful for the students, even how to make it successful for us as faculty or even staff, that we all become a cohesive group and work together in a common goal.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
I'm a Dr. Elizabeth Kuchler, and I'm, well, right now I'm an associate, but I have been promoted to full professor, college professor. Well, we're here for several reasons, right? So we heard you the last time you were here, and we were very impressed. We were very excited when we left. We were like, oh, you know.
Thank you.
And then, so we knew that you could speak, and that you were very versatile and what did you say? Yes.
That word.
That word.
If only I could spell it.
Don't ask me to do that.
No, me either.
And I'm I am the, oh my God. The outreach, there you go. I'm the outreach person on the SAMHSA grant, which is about the suicide prevention and mental health here. And I've had an interest in mental health most of my life because I can do all three now: personal live, family, and advocacy.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here.
Last.
But not least, yeah.
Right, I'm Shelley Now. I am an associate professor here at NMSU. I'm the director for our psych nurse practitioner program. Also, psych nurse practitioner across the lifespan of a private practice, but I am the principal investigator for the GLS Suicide Prevention Grant. And really for me, I want to introduce resilience into our grad school courses. I think that that is a real fragile time for people when they're trying to get their doctorate. And I think it's also a stressful time for the doctoral faculty. And so I think on both sides, I'd like to hear how best we can navigate that.
Awesome, awesome. So with that being said, I'm sure we may have some additional responses in the chat on virtually. I want you to keep them coming. And for everyone here, this session today is very much informal, and that You can interrupt, you can ask questions, we can engage. That's the goal for this session, is for us to collaboratively learn. So number one, my objective, anytime I do anything in relation to this, and some of you heard it already, is to create a safe space for an honest conversation. And so in order for us to create that safe space for that conversation, everyone or as many people need to be involved in the conversation, because you're going to share something that's going to spark an idea in my mind. I may share a couple of things that may give you some ideas, and together we can collaborate to come up with some creative solutions as far as resources for ourselves, for the students that we serve and support, and then in our immediate circles, in the community. I'm sure everyone here represents an immediate circle. You represent something or some organization in the community. And what we talk about today will be transferable as far as the different networks and communities that you're part of. With that being said, please don't feel any pressure if you need to interrupt or, hey, clarify that thing, or hey, I got something to share. That's what this session is for. So what are we talking about today? I've heard it multiple times, and it excites me to know that there are many people who are represented in this room and virtually. So what's really cool about that is when you have representation from many different either departments or people groups, you get to experience what it's like to have diverse ideas, perspectives that lead to innovative solutions. So when we talk about resilience, right, resilience may mean one thing to one person, and it may mean something completely different to another person, right? And the only way we can get both understandings is if we collaborate in our understanding and conversation about it. So a couple of things that we're going to cover, obviously, resiliency for personal growth. So I heard a couple of people mention today, I want to learn some tools for myself, right? I got to get up every day and I commit to my work. I commit to the people that I serve and support. And some days it's harder than other days. So what are some tools and practices that I can engage in to ensure that I'm growing in the area of resilience or understanding it at a level to where I can enhance in that area? And then we're going to talk about its relationship to student success. All right, so what does resilience mean in the context of student success academically, but also personally and then professionally, right? So it definitely plays a role. We're going to share a practical framework as far as how do you connect with students. But what you'll notice in this framework is it helps you to connect with yourself as well. And when we talk about serving and supporting other people, there is that aspect of self-awareness, right? That is necessary for us to be able to be in a position to help someone else. So we'll talk about that practical framework. We'll talk about some resources and support networks that are available to students, practical techniques, right? So specific things that we can do that can quickly shift someone's narrative, someone's experience, even if it's just for a moment, that helps the individual to realize I can persist just a little bit longer, or I can pause, right? I can pause and recognize what I need in this moment in order to move forward in the future. And then we'll talk about a step-by-step action plan, and we'll actually work on that together. Hopefully, more of us than not will still be here because it'll be towards the ending of it. And with this action plan, you can utilize it for yourself, as well as if you're working directly with students or with students in any capacity, you can walk them through developing their own individual action plan for when they experience difficult experiences, emotions, scenarios, and how to navigate that effectively in relation to their mental health. Another thing is you will see a QR code. So I'd love for you to pull out your cell phones, scan this QR code, because you will have access to this guidebook. And we will be referring to this, referring back to this guidebook multiple times throughout the session. And once you scan it, you'll have access to keep this guidebook. So in this guidebook, there are multiple resources, there are specific guides, there are crisis hotlines and different tools that we'll discuss here, but you can utilize even after today. So raise your hand if anyone has trouble accessing the guide. And I get Charlie out. Say again? To you? Yeah, so if you wanted to print that out, obviously you can print it out and fill it out yourself. And some of these components in the guide we'll go over today, and that way you'll be able to know how to utilize them after this session. And for those who are virtual, if you are not able to access the QR code for whatever reason, I will make sure that we can send it out afterwards so you have access to it. Anyone need more time to scan the QR? Just raise your hand. Cool. All right, so who is this guy standing in front of you and why do I care about mental health? I shared a little bit that I wanted to touch on the impact it has for a student who is not necessarily comfortable seeking mental health support and their first interaction with seeking mental health support and how that's a critical moment in time for that individual. So you heard earlier, my name is Abraham Scully, and this handsome guy, as you can see, I've been handsome my whole life, right? It's amazing, right? You know, you're 10 and then you get older and you're like 14 and you're still handsome. And then you graduate, hey, good to see you. And then you graduate from high school and you're still handsome, right? So that handsome, tall, dark guy right there is me. And I put these pictures up because there are critical moments in everyone's life that shapes how you show up in the world. And if we are not self-aware enough, sometimes we miss those critical times in our lives and how they shaped us and how we can utilize those specific situations in our lives to help us move forward in life. I heard, can you give me your name again?
Sandra.
Sandra, I heard Sandra mention earlier trauma, right? And the fact that, you know, there are many individuals that experience trauma. And if you're familiar with ACEs or adverse childhood experiences, typically traumatic experiences happen when you're much younger, right? And it shapes the way you see the world, it shapes the way you interact with other people. And if we're not mindful of the fact that we experience traumatic things in our lives, then we go about living our lives with this lens, not knowing where it came from. And that's my story. So I was raised by Jamaican immigrants. Both of my parents moved to the United States and they decided to start their family. They moved here with my older sister and then have the rest of us. I am 1 out of 7 children. It's a lot of kids, right? We're building an army, right? But I was raised in a Jamaican household. So one thing about, you know, Caribbean households or those specific dynamics is you learn very quickly that there are things that you don't discuss. And it's not that someone tells you, hey, we don't discuss that thing, but more is caught than taught. I also grew up in a religious household. Dad was a pastor growing up. And so when you think about the dynamics of the Caribbean background and the cultural experience, as well as the religious dynamic and merging the two, it almost makes sense why I had this warped, you know, understanding of mental health and mental health conditions. So I'm 14 years old and my parents, after being married for over 20 years, decide to divorce. Right. And as a 14-year-old, I didn't know what to do with that. I thought growing up, you know, my entire life, this is what my household looks like, and this is what it would look like forever. And then the divorce happens. And now I'm moving from one house to another house. I used to hang out with all my siblings, and now I see them here and there, sometimes on the weekends. And as a 14-year-old, more times than not, if you don't have those specific conversations to discuss what that does to your mental state, your psychological state, you develop certain habits or you develop certain ways to cope with the feelings, the thoughts and experiences that you have. And that's what I did. So one of the ways that I chose to cope was I suppressed everything that I felt. And in suppressing everything that I felt, obviously as a human being going through life and having the human experience, you have to learn how to cope well. Because if you don't cope well, right, it will show up, right? So one of the ways that I cope is I suppressed it. I held a lot of things in it. And I did that until I couldn't. And I remember when I was 14, from the moment the divorce officially happened, leading up until I was a junior in high school, my behavior shifted. So pre-divorce was I was almost gonna say straight A student, but I wasn't straight. I was very close. AB, more A's than B's, but I was a good student, right? I cared about my academics and I cared about doing well. And I was a very respectable young man, right? And yes, I had my fun here and there, and I loved to, bother my siblings and make a lot of trouble in the house, but it was all fun trouble. But I went from that to shifting into this young person who didn't care anything about anything. And I fast forward and look at the young Abraham then, and it makes complete sense. I was trying to cope, but I didn't know that's what it was. All I knew was that I shifted as far as how I was showing up in the world. I stopped respecting authority. I stopped respecting my parents. I got introduced to alcohol and smoking and all of these different things, and I started to dabble in that. I started to hang out with a certain crowd of individuals that I wouldn't typically hang out with. And the trajectory of my life kind of, started to go downward. My junior year of high school, I have this guidance counselor. And even though I was always in trouble in high school, that was just the thing, right? I was either always walking around with the school security because I got kicked out of class, or I was just not in class, right? And then they found me and now I'm walking around with security. So I was either in trouble or about to get in trouble or looking for some trouble to get involved in. And this specific guidance counselor, he saw beyond my behavior and what I was portraying. And he saw for, some way, I don't know what it was, what sparked it, but he saw the young man who was struggling to cope. And I remember this specific guidance counselor, and we're really good friends to this day. And we, hang out when we can, which is pretty cool now that, I'm on a different trajectory. But what was really cool about spending time with this counselor is that he didn't force anything, right? What he did was he kind of just created this space, and whatever I felt like sharing, because I felt safe, I would share, and certain things I didn't share. And then when I felt safer, I shared even more. And it got to a point where I started to trust the things that were coming out of his mouth. And that wasn't the case for a lot of adults, mostly because of what happened with the divorce. So my trust out the window. But we started to build this relationship to where he would say things and I would actually consider it. And one day he says, hey, I think you would do well in college. What are your thoughts as far as going to college, being a student and getting a degree? And my first response was, no one in my family ever went to college, and so I'm not going to college. Like, that's not for me. I'm gonna graduate from high school. I already got a job at Wendy's. And so I'm gonna move from, working part-time to working full-time, make a whole lot of money.
Get a Porsche.
Right, get a Porsche, many years after, right? But that was my plan. That was the furthest I could see. But he saw beyond that, and he would entertain little conversations and ideas. And again, I trusted this guy. So, he brought it up, and I'm thinking, well, can I be a college student? Can I actually be successful? And so one thing about Joe is that he was very persistent. So I don't know if he was intentional with it, but whether he was intentional or not, he was very persistent. So even though I shut it down when he initially brought it up, he would bring it up again. The next time, he saw me, hey, did you think about that? I'll be like, Joe, come on. And I told you, I'm not doing this college thing. But Joe convinced me to try college. And so by my senior year, I made a decision that I would go as far as I can go from home and still pay in-state tuition. So I chose 700 miles away from home, from Miami, which is home for me at that time, the University of West Florida. So now I'm at the University of West Florida, and I have this new confidence. I have this almost like a new identity as far as what I thought I was capable of, and now being in a position and realizing, oh, there's probably more that I could do, more that I can accomplish. But as that college freshman, I also was a first-generation student. So no one in my family had gone to college. And so there was no one that had context as far as what does college look like? How do you navigate financial aid? How do you navigate all these different things? So I'm figuring it out while I'm 700 miles away from home. In addition to figuring it out, I'm working full-time because I gotta work full-time. And I have my own apartment, which means I went from living at, dad's house to now in my own apartment, paying rent. I didn't know that was a thing. I had an idea that, my parents paid bills, but I didn't know oh, these bills, they just keep coming. And so now I'm 18 years old, having to work a job because I gotta pay rent and then I gotta feed myself. I gotta do my own laundry. I'm doing all the things. And nowhere in making the jump to go to college did I ever consider or anticipate that I would ever feel the way that I felt when I was 14. I thought that was done. I thought I left that. I thought, okay, I'm far away, and I'm saying all of this in hindsight. Obviously, I didn't make that conscious decision at that time to go that far away because I felt like I was running from something, which I was, and I later learned that I was. But I made that decision because I saw this new compelling future. So I thought I left that. Yeah, my parents divorced, and yeah, that affected me, and yeah, I had all these negative feelings and emotions, and I was coping, but new me, new year, new me, right? And so I had this perfect plan of what it meant to be a successful college student. I was going to study for 4 years. My degree was information technology. And my degree audit said I would be done in exactly 4 years, so it has to be right? That's what the academic counselor told me. And so after I graduated, I was going to have this perfect job and make a whole lot of money. Man, I was going to get the Porsche. I'm not really a car person. I probably wouldn't get a Porsche, but that I at least would have enough money that if I wanted one, I would get it. And the degree would get me there, right? So I was going to have this really good job, make a whole lot of money, and not only provide for myself, but provide for my family. So that was this plan that I had. And I did not consider that I would also struggle with my mental health. So I shared, some of the factors around my life experience that led me to being this college student. And you're listening to my story now and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense that you struggled with your mental health. Not only did you experience all of that unresolved, and I later learned it was trauma, right? When we think about adverse childhood experiences and coming from a divorced household, I didn't know that was trauma. I thought only, military veterans experience trauma. I thought you had to go through specific events in your life for that to be trauma, right? So I went through all of that, but not only did I go through all of that, but now, I'm doing all the things as a college student, right? And you're thinking to yourself, obviously you would struggle at some point unless you're like Superman or something, right? Were you thinking that? Like it makes sense that you struggle with your mental health, right? In hindsight, it makes sense. But at the time I thought, oh, I'm good. So all of these happen and I start to struggle with my mental health. Had no plan, had no idea what mental health was, had no idea what a mental health condition was. And thankfully, I had a good friend of mine who saw that I was struggling. She saw the shift happen from me being a very enthusiastic, motivated student who was just going after it to isolating, not being as communicative, not engaging, and she recognized it. She reached out, and long story short, she helped me to identify with the mental health challenge enough to then go seek mental health support. When I sought mental health support, I met the front desk lady, going back to your role, and she was the kindest woman I've ever met in my life. So I'm going to this, I don't know if it's called CAPS here as well, but a lot of colleges and universities, Counseling and Psychological Services Center. So I went to the CAPS Center, and the way the center was positioned on the campus, right? If anyone sees you walking in that direction, they know you're going to the CAPS Center. There's no way around it. It's like, if I see you going in that direction, that's where you're going. So now, I'm this, this guy coming from this background and having all of these preconceived notions around mental health and seeking support. And I am terrified that, number one, someone might see me walk into this building. Number two, what if I try it and it doesn't work? And number three, what if I meet someone and, it's just this terrible experience? So you have all these ideas floating around in your head. You don't know what to expect. You've never done it before. But then I meet this amazing lady who's at the front desk, right? And she walked me through the entire process. Another person that is still in my life today. And we've been able to do different projects together outside of being a student. As you can notice, I try to keep good people close to me, right? So, and her name is Linda, right? So I don't know if Linda won't see this, but I'm sure she'd love it if she did see it. But Linda, she introduced herself and she told me what the counseling center was, and she told me how she could help. And she shared with me, hey, this is what we can do to get you something, right? We're not going to leave you where you are. The fact that you walked in here, like, you did it. Now from here, I'll take it, right? I will do as much as I can to support you. And thankfully, I had a really good experience, and I was able to seek support from a mental health professional. And it was there that I was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And then not long after, started in treatment for depression. So now I am having this new understanding that depression is a real thing. It's not just a sign of weakness, or it's not a sign of weakness, right? But what I thought was, no, it's a sign of weakness. Like, if you are depressed, that means you're weak, right? So now I'm having this new understanding. And now I'm learning, oh, if you are depressed, you can do something about it. You can get help. There are people who are specifically in that position to help you. And I continue on this journey and understanding and learning that depression, things like depression, and I'll talk about depression specifically, but generally speaking, I'm talking mental health conditions, right? Mental illness in general. They don't discriminate. Doesn't care what you look like, your background, your history, how much you love life, how much of a go-getter you are, how much you've accomplished, does not discriminate. And I think it's important to continue to understand that, because with the students that you serve and support, there has to be a shared understanding of it does not discriminate. If I take my personal experience, and can I be honest with you guys? Is this a safe space? No, no. So we're just gonna pretend like it's a safe space until it becomes a safe space. How about that? So growing up, I thought depression was a white person's issue. I didn't know Black people got depressed. No, I'm being so serious right now. And so that's just my personal experience, but imagine the number of students that either come to receive services who have that in the back of their mind as far as it being like an actual barrier to either seeking support or utilizing the support in the way that is most effective for them. And the reason I share that is because if that is the understanding that, oh, people like me don't experience these things, then we have to come to some level of understanding to be able to get progress, right? One of the things that I realized in my own journey is I had to accept the fact that, no, this is where I am now. Yes,
The entire Southwest does not allow depression. You just need to get busy and get through it.
yeah,
White, brown, whatever
Yeah.
the color. The
Yeah.
entire region.
yeah. I'm sure,
Does
I'm
not
sure it's
allow
not,
depression.
I'm sure I'm not the only one. And thank you for clarifying, right? And the other part too is, so I live in the South. So there's that component now, but absolutely, it's a shared experience. I mean, how many, just by a show of hands and virtual hands, how many of us grew up actively having conversations about mental health? Like it was just a part of discussion at home, right? It's okay if the answer is yeah for some of us. So so is it no for the majority? So if it's no for the majority, it makes sense that we don't have a clear understanding around mental health conditions. So let's start there, right? If we can start there, we can build from that. And I share that because that is a component that's necessary in working with students, right? It's being able to remove the different layers, right? That cover up the core of why this student is where they are, right? And in removing those layers, it requires asking questions, which we're going to go through some of that today, and we'll kind of workshop some things. But absolutely, so it does not discriminate, and anyone can be affected, right? And if anyone can be affected, anyone can also seek support. Now, through Speaks to Inspire, we did a national student survey a couple of years ago. And in the survey, we asked specific questions. And not only in the survey, but I've been, I've had the opportunity to speak on multiple, university campuses and have worked with students, faculty, staff on many different levels. And I typically ask this question, and some of you who saw me present last year, you probably remember this question, but I typically ask this question, and what I'm about to share with you in just a couple of seconds are some of the responses that we've heard the most. So we consolidated some of those specific reasons why students, and actually people in general, right, don't ask or seek mental health support. Right, so I'd like to, before I show you those responses, I'd like to ask the question here to see if it may align with some of what we have here. So just, if you want to just kind of yell it out, or if anyone is on Zoom and you'd like to share, you can share it in the chat or you can raise your hand. But what makes it difficult to ask for help?
Problems aren't that bad.
Yeah,
It's like here all the time.
yeah, it's not that bad, yeah. Thank you for sharing, yeah.
Social counseling groups like collegial services for like crazy people, really unstable.
Yeah.
It's similar to
Yeah,
that.
sorry, it's not that bad. Yeah.
Kind of it.
Yeah. Yep. Anything? Yeah.
Embarrassment.
Embarrassment. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. What makes it difficult to ask for help?
I think a desire for like, it's my problem, so I'll figure it out myself.
Yeah. I see that a lot amongst men specifically. Yeah.
I should be able to do this,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there's,
Mm-hmm.
I just need to be more disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, I should be able to do this.
Yeah. And we have in the chat, I'm gonna read it from here. Thank you for your help. Lack of access to resources. Sign of weakness or failure. I should be able to do it by myself, like we just heard. Sometimes it's hard to admit or face. Oh man, that's a huge one. So if I admit it, that means that I now have to do something different. I can't remember who it was, maybe like Maya Angelou. It's something to the effect of, once you know something, you can't unknow it, right? And so now that you know, you got to do something with that information. And so we run from having to do something, so we don't engage with it. But anyone else in the room want to share? What makes it difficult to ask for help?
If you come from a family or a culture that shames any mental health related topics or completely avoids the topic
Yeah,
entirely.
yeah, thanks, yeah,
Or if you've had a negative experience before when you did ask for help,
yeah,
like of a school counselor or a teacher or somebody at church or,
yeah,
because
Yeah.
a lot of times people are rebuffed. If they're
Yes.
not in the hands of really well-trained professionals, they can get rebuffs.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's a necessary point, especially for this group who is here, as far as those of us who do provide service and support to students. That, especially for specific demographics of students, sometimes that first time can be the first or last time they try it, you know, based on the background around seeking mental health support. So thanks for sharing that. Anything else? What makes it difficult to ask for help?
Sometimes like on very religious households.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They tend to religion.
Just need to pray more.
Yeah, you're not praying enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me pray over you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with
No, this
get the
is-
demons out. Oh, I hear. Yeah. I have some unfortunate stories around that, and it's a real thing. We think about the fact that, you know, we are in 2024 and things have developed, but in many cases, our mindsets and understanding around things like mental health has not, you know, and so that's still a real thing as far as, you know, you got to get the demons out, you know, so thanks for sharing. So some of the responses that kept coming up, and again, this was a survey. I think we received 300 or so responses from students across the country, all different universities and colleges. And they were saying, hey, I'm afraid of what others will think of me, right? And we've heard that here already. I don't want to be a burden. Everyone has their thing going on. I don't want to add to their thing. I had a very interesting interaction at a school that I was at a couple of weeks ago. And this young guy who was a student, he asked a really good question. He said, you know, how do I help my friend who believes that it is a burden for other people to help me? And that interaction was very interesting because in asking more questions, clarifying questions, we were able to come to this understanding that those words were never communicated to that friend. No one ever told him, hey, you're being a burden to me. So this idea of being a burden could have been developed, right? It wasn't something, an experience that this person had, but maybe because of life experiences, they developed this understanding that felt very real enough to keep what they were struggling with to themselves. Right, and in that interaction, we were able to recognize, hey, you know, no one actually told you that you are a burden and you reaching out is a burden. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true. The reason I'm even asking you, you know, how you're doing is because I want to help, right? And so being able to work through some of those barriers is very important. I can't be vulnerable. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later when I introduce that framework that I talked about from the objectives. But a lot of people don't know how, right? Or don't know when it's the right time to share, or don't know who they can share with, right? And so one thing that I do love to share, you know, when I do these talks, workshops, presentations with students or whoever, is that you have to identify safe people. Not everyone is safe. Let's just get, let's just start with that. Yes, being vulnerable is important, but no, it's not a good idea to be vulnerable with everyone. So how do we identify the safe people and then ensure that we develop the relationship enough to where when it's time to be vulnerable, we have the space to do so effectively. So I can't be vulnerable. So if I believe that I don't know how to do it, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to be seen as weak. So we heard this one a couple of times. I tried and had a bad experience. And I want to pause for the last one just because of who I'm speaking with today. And some of you, most of you are in roles where you're supporting students, right? And you're here in this session to learn, practical skills to support yourself. But even so, supporting students. I had a conversation with a student a couple of years ago, and it was a devastating experience that this young lady experienced. Now, she wasn't new to being open about her own mental health and engaging with mental health services. Thankfully, she was exposed to that early on. So she was able to identify when she needed new skills and new tools, and when she was in life experiences that it would be helpful to invite a mental health professional. But she's on campus and she is seeking mental health support. She's meeting with this counselor. And throughout the session with this counselor, the counselor is going through what their notes and, asking the questions and clarifying questions and going through the process of engaging with this young person. And this young lady, she's sharing, right? She's sharing the different experiences that are leading her to a place where she feels she needs mental health support. And as she's sharing, she's actually crying, right? She's getting emotional and she's going through the story and she's really locked into this conversation. And there's silence. She looks up and the counselor is fast asleep.
Oh.
Now, I share that story, and some of you have, very specific responses to that, and some of you may have opposing responses to that. And I'm not going to ask you to share because we don't want to do a debate right now. But not knowing what all this counselor is going through in their own personal life or whatever the situation is, but also understanding that this individual is in a very vulnerable position, believing that this is a safe space to share and has this experience. So this is a real life experience that can potentially be an experience that causes this person to never want to try it again. And I share that story because that is the experience of many people, right? One thing I also share when I do different talks is, hey, not every mental health professional is created equally. And the reason I share that is because just because they are a mental health professional and they are in the position to provide you with support and services, it does not mean that they may do a good job or they may be the right fit for you. And the reason I share that is because a lot of young people, especially when they initially engage, there's this idea that it's supposed to be the right fit the first time, but that's not the case for many different reasons. And so it's important to know that, hey, I may have a few bad experiences. And if those bad experiences come up, how can I develop different tools to be in a position to bounce back from that experience, right? We talk about resiliency, and resilience being the ability to bounce back from adversity quickly, right? How can I develop the tools that when I have that experience, it doesn't take me out of the game, but I'm able to process it, I'm able to understand how it affects me, and then chart the course forward that's most efficient and effective for where I am. So this young lady has that experience. How do you encourage that person to try it again? I'd love to hear from you. That's a real question. How do you encourage someone in that position who legit has that experience? Like they're giving everything in this session and have that experience. How do you encourage them to give it another try? What are some things that we can share? Yeah. Yeah, I'll come.
Maria.
With the hand raised. Yes, please come off of mute. I'd love to hear from you.
Hi, this is Marie. I am one of the counselors from the Aggie Health and Wellness Center. And so to speak to your question, I think that's actually something, it's a common experience that individuals unfortunately come across, especially in underserved communities. Not every mental health service is created equally, for better or worse. Here at the Aggie Health and Wellness Center, I know one of the ways that we try to, really work with students and our stakeholders across campus is to allow individuals to make a choice. We give them various options for referrals, whether that be in the community If transportation is an issue or, you know, virtual appointments, so options as far as format, you know, we really try to take individual student preferences into consideration. And I think a lot of times people don't know, they don't recognize that they have the right to make that decision as far as, you know, I have other options or this person is not the best fit. So I know from our side, we allow students that option too, you know, like, hey, every semester or once a year, if this person, you know, that you're meeting with is not the best fit for you, you know, you have a right to request a different counselor, a different professional, and we can talk about why it didn't work, what did work, and see if there might be someone else who would be a better match. So really trying to empower the student also to advocate for themselves, in addition to providing the options.
Thank you, Marie, so much for sharing. So anyone else, how do we encourage the student who does try, who does seek out, and they have a bad experience? Yes.
So in addition to offering Aggie Health and Wellness and these awesome services that Marie just spoke to, and something that I've said to people in my life outside of work, you deserve it. You deserve a quality of life that anyone else deserves. Don't let a bad experience, don't let someone else hold you back.
Thank you for sharing that. And just that statement alone speaks volumes for many people who believe the opposite about themselves. So that's something, that's a really good share. That's something super practical as far as being able to, and we're going to talk about this as well, as far as misconceptions or the lies associated with the things that keep us from seeking support. It's one way to kind of interrupt that conversation that's happening in their heads. Yep.
But I tell people is that like the therapeutic relationship is still a social relationship. Friends, romantic partner, certain family culture. So think that there is several values and how you want to approach your problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
I'm gonna kind of take it at a different point.
Please.
The provider may have a health history and have a problem, like say narcolepsy. And they could have been talking to this provider, not realizing they had narcolepsy, and the provider fell asleep.
Yeah.
Okay, so
That's a real thing
you
too.
would try to encourage the student, try and go back to find a different provider, like you're saying. For the fact that maybe this provider has had some health issues.
Sure.
And, you know, they fell asleep, not intentionally, they just fell asleep because they got narcolepsy.
Sure.
You know, just because one person falls asleep doesn't mean another person.
Yeah.
Fall asleep. Fortunately, they experienced a bad experience, but one right doesn't make a wrong, or how does that saying go? Two rights don't make a wrong. What that saying? Two rights don't make a wrong. Two wrongs make a right. And so you have to look at trying to encourage that there could have been another avenue for the provider health history. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So 1, 2.
So as a medical provider, I would have people that come in, older people, and they have a problem, and I talk to them and I'd say, I think you're depressed, you know, and I can give you medicine, but I need you to go counseling too, you know. I already had bad experience. I said, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So what happened? And then they tell me, and I say, well, I got this person that I can send you to. And then there's another one over here that isn't here called Stephanie. And I'm like, I have this person that I'm going to refer you to. And I think you'll have a better experience. So if you know different people, you kind of, you know, but I try to let them know that I acknowledge their bad experience.
Yes.
And let me see if I can help.
Yeah, it's very important. Let's validate their experience. Let's acknowledge that what they're experiencing is real, you know. Thank you for sharing. Yes.
I think that normalizing
things, not just seeking mental health support. I
Yeah.
think there's been a lot more in the media and social media and public figures, you know, sharing their mental health struggles and sharing their, what, you know, that they you know, seek therapy or sought therapy, but also normalizing the idea that, you know, I had others who, you know, haven't had a great experience with this person, they've gone to see someone else and maybe it didn't work out there, but maybe saw a third person, that's perfectly normal.
Yep.
And I think for, especially our campus age students, but I think for all of us, trying to feel normal or be normal is a big piece of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point. And I think in normalizing it, we also normalize the human experience. I think many things we do experience that is actually a part of the human experience, because it's not normalized, we put it in this silo as far as this is a unique thing that only happened to me and it wasn't supposed to, you know, it shouldn't have, which all of those things are also valid experiences, right? But normalizing does help to normalize the human experience as far as we are complex beings, right? We got to be comprehensive as far as our approach to supporting student mental health, and understanding backgrounds and all of these different dynamics that play a role. So thank you for sharing. Did I have anyone else virtually that had anything? Okay, awesome. So in doing the survey, we also found that there was a lack of education. So simple, basic mental health education, right? Many young people either believed, right, mental health and mental illness were synonymous, right? So they meant the same thing and would use them interchangeably, right? Mental health is not me because I'm not depressed. But mental health and mental illness are two totally different things, right? So because of that lack of education, there was a disconnect as far as when do I seek help? I heard that a couple of times. It's not that bad. I had a conversation with a student not too long ago, and she was sharing some of the experiences that she had kind of day to day, and it's been, you know, persistent, but she said in her words, you know, I was able to shake it off, and then, you know, I was better. And so her question was, you know, should I talk to somebody even if I can shake it off? I'm like, why not? It's like going in for a checkup, like, you know, our annual checkup. Do we wait until we are sick or in crisis physically before we seek support?
Depends on your payment source.
Depends on your payment. There's another barrier, right? There's another barrier. But then how can we get creative in identifying what resources do exist that can bypass whether it's having insurance or not, or all those other situations? So lack of education, right? What is mental health? I thought mental health meant depression. And now you're saying, no, these are two different things. And so it's very important that we educate as well. And so one of the simplest ways that we can educate is by sharing what mental health is, right? The simplest way I like to put it is a state of well-being, right? It's how I'm doing, right? How I'm interacting in the world, how I'm navigating through different relationships, whether personal, interpersonal, you know, professional, what those relationships look like, how I see the world, how I see myself in the world, right? And here are the dimensions of wellness. Some of you may have seen this, but if not, you can just Google it, 8 dimensions of wellness. But this really highlights the different dimensions, right, that make up our well-being, right? And so we talk about spirituality, right? That's a component that we can't neglect. Emotional, occupational, intellectual, right? And it goes on, social, it goes on, right? And if we can look at it from this holistic perspective, we're less likely to put it in this box as far as that's not me. But how many people will say, social? That's not me, right? Even if we are introverted, right? Or we tend more to, you know, being more toward the introverted kind of, you know, makeup, right? We all know that we're social beings, right? The way we were created and designed is to connect, right? We all need human connection. So if we can engage in the mental health conversation by looking at the different aspects that make up our wellness, then it helps to not only normalize, but educate young people and also educate ourselves. as far as what is mental health. And then we talk about, I like to also share this, the continuum as far as mental health is concerned, but understanding that it's not this or that, black or white, you know, yes or no, right? But it's on this continuum as far as the state of well-being, my state of well-being. How am I doing? Right? And so I like to ask myself 3 self-awareness questions, right? I put myself through this self-awareness check. And if you are taking notes, I would recommend this, not only for yourself, but also with the students you serve. But I ask myself, how have you been thinking lately? And if I want to go even deeper, how have you been thinking lately in relation to how you typically think? Then I ask myself, how have you been feeling lately? If I want to go deeper, how have you been feeling lately in relation to how you typically feel? And then the final question, how have you been behaving lately? And if I want to go deeper, how have you been behaving lately in relation to how you typically behave? So in asking myself these 3 questions, I can check in to see how I'm doing, to know where I land on this continuum. So it's not I'm this or that, depressed or not, but I am here now. And if I'm here now, then I can start from that baseline and identify what tools I need to either get on the other side of that continuum or maintain where I am. Many students either have a low self-awareness, low level of self-awareness and understanding of themselves and how they are in the world. And so these questions by themselves can help to build their level of self-awareness, which in turn impacts their resilience. Because if I know that I am in a season of my life right now where the amount of stress is almost inevitable. Let's say, for example, how many of you guys have kids, right? Whether you birth them or you just take care of them, right? I don't have kids, but I've heard many stories, especially from my older sister and my brother-in-law, that there are certain times when you have kids, you just don't sleep. You just accept the fact you ain't gonna get no sleep and you just have to still show up for work, right? Anybody resonate with that? Right, so if I understand that, hey, I am in a season of my life where this is inevitable, I'm just not gonna get any sleep, then let's start there. Okay, if I'm there, and I recognize how have I been thinking lately, how have I been feeling lately, how have I been behaving lately, then I can incorporate little things to at least help myself with where I am in relation to the grand scheme of things. But the opposite of that is I'm going through that same experience, new parent, but having the same expectation as far as productivity, amount of hours I'm getting sleep. I'm expecting myself to still get 8 hours, even though I have this newborn baby, right? Or I'm going through life with this level of expectation, then I am more likely to land on the opposite end of that spectrum, to where I'm not doing well mentally and possibly maybe suffering from a certain mental illness, right? So that self-awareness is key. And the self-awareness helps us to then build mechanisms in place to support ourselves. With that, we're going to break for an icebreaker. Some of you may have heard this icebreaker, and some of you, it will be brand new, but it is called the ribbon connection activity. So you scanned the QR code earlier. We're going to go back to that guidebook. And for those of you who are tuned in virtually, we won't put you in groups virtually, but we'll give you an opportunity to share in just a few. But for those of us who are here in person, I want you to pull up that guidebook that you scanned earlier, and I want you to go to page number 10. It should say in big blue letters, ribbon connection, pick a ribbon. Raise your hand if you have not found it yet. You need some time. All right, we'll give you some time. And then same for our virtual attendees, page 10. All right, so as you're scrolling through and finding it, I'm gonna briefly explain how this activity will work. And then I'm gonna break us up in groups, right? And then I'm gonna share what the activity is. Is that cool? All right, so you have it on your phone in case you actually wanna go through it and follow along as I'm explaining it, but I'm gonna do a brief explanation of the ribbon connection. All right, so with this activity, it's an opportunity for us to identify who's in the room, why you're here, and why you care about this subject matter. So what is your connection to mental health? So there are 3 ribbons, and 3 ribbons have 3 different colors. The first color is green. So this is our green ribbon, and it signifies your own lived experience in relation to mental health. Blue, this represents your desire to support a family member or friend in relation to mental health. Yellow represents you being a mental health advocate. So just to give brief descriptions for each, with the lived experience, the green one, you are basically in a position because of your lived experience to connect with people on a personal level because of your personal experience. Blue, this is where you have empathy for others because of a family member or friend that has struggled with their own mental health, and you can connect with others on that level. Yellow, you're in a position where professionally or just your personal passions, you want to advocate for change. That means you're out, you're making sure laws are changed. You're out making sure the university has the necessary funding. You're out doing all the things to make sure those who need the services and support are getting the services and support that they need. But there's a catch. If you can hear me, I want you to say, what catch? With each of these 3 ribbons, although you may identify with all 3, you can only pick one. And that's typically the hardest part in this activity, but you can only pick one. So green, lived experience, blue, supporting a family member or friend, yellow, mental health advocate. So I am going to give you 30 seconds to sit with it. Yes. Sarah,
You put up the QR code, and there's people that came in a little later.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, you didn't say that.
Oh, oops. Okay, let's do that. Okay, here we go. So here's the QR code. Thank you for that. And I saw that you put the PDF in there. Thank you for that. All right, so again, green, lived experience, blue, supporting a family member or friend, yellow, mental health advocate. So I'll give you about 30 seconds to just sit with it and make the hardest decision you have to make all day and pick one.
It's just for this class, not for the rest of our life.
No, just
For the rest of your life.
for the rest of your life, right? And so, and that's a good question, I think. And just to give you some context and clarity as far as, well, how do I pick which one? So here's my example of how I pick which one. I would select lived experience only because if it weren't for my own lived experience, I would care nothing about mental health. And I would know nothing about mental health, and I would desire to know nothing about mental health. So it wasn't until I had my own experience with depression where I was like, whoa, this thing is real. And it hit me so hard that I was like, well, now I want to advocate for this thing. I want to support my friends and family. I want to be a voice. I want to speak about this thing. So I would select green because I wouldn't be in this position to do what I'm doing if it weren't for that experience. So even though it was one of the hardest, things I had ever experienced, it created something positive, right? So you may have a different experience as far as what is that driving force for you to engage in this subject matter as it relates to mental health. So at this point, everyone should have identified which color. And now for the activity, I'm going to count us out 1, 2, 3, right? So everyone will either have a 1, a 2, or a 3. Once we each have a number, then we're going to break up in different parts of the room. Our ones, well, actually, let's do it here. So our 1s, our 2s, and our threes. So ones, twos, threes. Ones, twos, threes. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One. What number did I give you?
3.
So 3. Sorry. So 3. Yep. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. And so we'll have one group that has one less. So you're not in the group. Thank you. You're fine. All right. So our ones up here, our twos in the back, my right, probably your left. And then our threes are over here. Ones, twos, threes. Ones, twos, threes. And then for those who are joining virtually. Oh, can we? Okay, well, they don't have to hear me. Okay, so let me explain.
Yeah.
It's gonna be low.
Okay.
No, that's me. I'm happy.
Let's do that. I like that. Yeah.
Maybe another training.
Okay, so here's the activity. Here is the activity. So everyone here selected a color. Raise your hand if you did not select a color. You're still trying to figure it out. All right, so we all picked our color. So this is the activity. I want you to go around this circle or semicircle, whatever you guys decide to create in your little group. And I want you to share the color that you selected and why. And I want you to kind of give the abridged version of the why so that we can get through as many people as we possibly can before we bring it back to the main group. All right, so what was the color of the ribbon and why'd you select it? The abridged version. And feel free to share just a little bit if you're comfortable sharing just a little bit. You don't have to go as far as all the details, but that's what we're gonna do. Any questions on what we're doing? And then virtual attendees, are we all good? We're gonna start in 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, perfect.
I just find myself.
So we're going to breakout rooms in our virtual.
And I think our being able to balance experiences, because they're so normal, but some of them, right, there's a rough habit and everybody's like, so I have patients, I have students, I have my own kids and family, or people in church who are in different age groups. Like somebody that I minister to is somebody who's on sclerosis, who stopped coming to church because she just wanted to be shown to be disabled, she got weaker, and hey, and something just suddenly died. Which makes she the $90,000. So we're going through these transitions, you know, babies and the kids and old kids, launching kids, marriages are going through different stages. And I watch them all, only now my patient. I just feel like my whole life is like when someone sees one child. And then helping them think how they're gonna get. Like this my goal. So, so I chose yellows, based on green and blue. So based on the initiative. It's for those yeah, for those people that are experiencing green and blue, I know where they're at. And so I want to help
I also enjoy blue. So when I have my kids and they started having gain interest, there was counselors in the school. And I kind of began to teach myself and then like support my kids to you know, encourage them, right? So now they're in their 30s, now they're open to asking. So resources, they're very open with me versus how I was raised. So 9 hours.
3 minutes, morning, we got 3 minutes.
My family, that was not allowed. There was severe signs of depression. Even certain people, really traumatic things left homelands. Because their bodies, their families again, real reasons. So when I experienced it, as they don't know.
Did you all go already?
Yes.
So I'd love to hear as far as so far what from the workshop and the color that you feel. What are some things that you guys have
Reading this, I figured it out, and
in relation to the values and what you personally crazy.
It's like Colombian sound. I quote one of my professors said, like, I think Colombians were also sophisticated. And I like the mental. Before I was our structure.
Projects and, but, really, making sure that they're right.
So, you know, we need to think the whole context of the environment.
There is one is we try to decrease the. Oh, yeah. Don't come to time. Think that our hospitals are.
Being able to advocate for the. Which we share that. Providing resources and mindful.
are enough out there.
Well, I don't know, he's figuring it
Yeah.
out.
That's what I was saying earlier, it was well hydrating.
I do.
We have about 50 seconds. If you already got through everyone so far, feel free to kind of make your way back to your seats. You can have, you know, side conversation. Yeah. You run to the restroom. Oh. What'd you say? I didn't get to it. We were trying to figure out the tech. But we figured it out. Yeah. All right, we got about 15 seconds. And as we're coming from the breakouts, I do want to take a 3 to 4 minute break for you to move your legs, run to the restroom, chew some gum, take your arms, and then we'll bring it back in about 3 minutes. So for our virtual attendees, we're gonna take a brief break, 2 to 3 minute break. And I will see you all back at 2:44. 2:44.
Yeah, no, it's,
Is that for the?
Oh, yeah. No, no.
Okay. So.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah, I came in, it was hot. Yeah, but I walked in the room, but in the hallway as well, yeah, it's at least warm, so that chills. Yeah.
I seriously.
Yeah. It's waiting.
So they just looked at.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you did not call it. You didn't have to do. Oh, yes, yes, it was a job. Yeah, it was a design job.
I almost get you out.
I think I have to go, actually, I have class at 3, yeah. Yeah,
Thanks
nice
for
to
coming.
meet you.
Oh,
You're such
yeah.
a nice person.
Yeah, thanks for being here,
Yeah, you
and we'll be
too.
in touch.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. I have added you on LinkedIn as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've shared my number with you as well.
Yep, and I have your
So, yeah.
number, so
Yeah.
we'll stay in contact.
Yeah, sure.
And thanks for what you do.
Oh, no problem. Okay, bye, Sheena.
Bye.
Actually, I have class. I need to go. Yeah, I have class at 3 to 4:15.
Awesome. Okay, I'll
Bye.
be in touch.
See you later.
Enjoy your day.
Yeah.
Horror movie. Well, it was in the Pope's Exorcist. Did you see that? Yeah, it wasn't very good.
So Sheena, as far as different projects,
Called The Exorcist.
outreach and different
I watched the
engagement
trailer,
stuff
yeah.
with students, are you working on anything new or anything exciting?
So we just finished our out of dark.
I heard about that, yeah.
We just wrapped that up. So before the semester, we have stress busters. So it's
Okay.
kind of like for students to come to stress with us. We have different activities like
Wow.
sensory activities,
He did latest.
even our resources, food and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a chiller.
Yeah,
event. During the summer is our planning for the fall.
Okay.
So we just plan a lot and then we do.
They never told us.
Okay.
So we'll table with that. Trying to find more different ways of getting a table
Mhm.
and not just have them steal our merch and leave.
Yeah.
So try and get them like, so they
To
know.
get them to stay, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but yeah, a lot of planning in the
gotcha. Cool. Is it pretty busy around that time as far as in comparison to the other parts of the year?
summer, is so easy.
Yeah,
Yeah, because there's no students.
okay,
So, it's just very.
at all?
No.
Okay,
So it's
gotcha.
really quiet around here. But yeah, we'll start to get more busy at the end of the summer.
Gotcha.
Yeah, start moving in.
Mhm. Cool. Yeah, I heard the Out of Darkness walk went well,
Yeah,
so that's always exciting.
yeah,
Yeah, those things, nationally, what I've seen as far as being able to reach different, people from different backgrounds, it seems to be that type of event that does it. Because you can get, it's already open to the public,
yeah.
but because it's a walk and the way it's set up, you can bring religious organizations, you can bring schools, you can bring
Yeah.
a bunch of
Everyone
types
can
of,
come.
yeah.
Yeah, we're really happy with it. It's on campus,
Yeah.
so we're really happy next year. Hopefully, we'll be back.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Cool. That's cool. All right, so we are going to get started. I'll give you a couple of seconds to make it back to your either virtual chair or your actual chair. Let's see, are we missing anyone? Cool. So this is-
And I know someone ran for coffee.
Yes. All right, so as we're coming in, I'd love to start off by hearing some takeaways when we did our breakouts, maybe something that you heard or something that you shared or an idea that you had as a result of that breakout that we just did. Would anyone like to share any takeaways from that small group activity we just engaged in? Yes.
It's hard to choose one color.
Yeah, it's a real thing. It's like decisions.
I think, same group, so maybe similar takeaway, but I feel like there's a lot of green that can show up in healthcare.
Yeah.
Or caregivers or anyone in that.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think along those lines, I think just recognizing that pretty much everyone has experienced some, issues, with mental health or challenges or trauma
Mhm.
at some point.
Mhm.
These days.
Yeah. Any other takeaways? You got anyone virtually with any takeaways from that activity, that group activity we just did? I think it was cool because I was kind of listening in on a few groups. I didn't make it my way over there. It was just a lot of steps and I wasn't counting my steps, so not just a walk for no reason, I'm just kidding. But one common theme was the green, right, and the lived experience, and I think that is very empowering as far as those who are providing support and those who need support to know there is that lived experience component, because a lot of students, you know, they do believe like they're alone. No one else has ever experienced that thing. And then they learn that, oh, wow, you know, my own counselor had, you know, their own challenges. And without even going into the specifics with that student, just that recognition alone can kind of create, you know, level ground as far as I'm not by myself. And this professional, right, that sometimes we put in this light as if they don't also experience life, right, has also experienced certain things that are similar, and we can connect on that level as well. So that was something that stood out for me. Yeah.
Well, one of the things is in nursing, we're always talking about my baby was in the NICU for this long. You know, a friend had appendicitis, and this is how this got diagnosed, and this. And very rarely do we volunteer information about mental health issues that have come up.
Yeah.
And some of it is you don't want to out somebody who doesn't want to be outed, but
sure.
I think without turning the focus on yourself completely, you can acknowledge that you had an experience earlier in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk about that as well as far as like, how do you have these conversations, right? A lot of what we're talking about today, it's not, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, like it's very comprehensive in nature when we talk about mental health. But we understand that is that significant that we have to figure out how to have the conversation. We can't neglect the conversation because it's a difficult conversation. It's best to figure out how to have it, right? And that's one thing we're going to touch on in just a little bit. Am I able to remove this thing, or is this?
Yeah, there's a.
Is it me? Okay. So we did the activity. Oh, it went away. Oh, so that's good. So we did the activity, and I hope you were able to also get to know the person who you were in the group with just a little bit more, as far as, you know, why they even care about mental health, why they care to be in this session. And I think that also helps in creating the space. Some of the things that we're discussing and we're doing in this session is very much, you know, approaches that are transferable across what you're doing. So I want you to be thinking about what it is that we're doing in relation to yourself and resilience for you, but also being able to take some of these things, right? The ribbon connection activity, take it, right? If you think that can be an icebreaker that can start conversations, utilize it. We talk about education and being able to ask these self-awareness questions and understanding what mental health is and the difference between that and mental illness. So absolutely take what it is that I'm sharing and find ways to incorporate it in your own well-being, and then also with the students that you serve and support. So I mentioned earlier, there's a difference between mental health and mental illness, right? And there are different mental illnesses, right? We talk about, you know, depression, anxiety disorders, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. There are multiple illnesses that exist. And it's important to know that there's a difference between the two. I'm only going to focus on depression. Some of you may have heard, and this kind of goes around as far as depression being like the common cold as far as mental illnesses, because a large majority of people do experience depression, do deal with depression, and are treated for depression. So we'll just focus in on this, but I want you to also be thinking about other illnesses that students and even yourself may, you know, deal with and have to navigate. But depression is a mood disorder, right? It affects the way we think, the way we feel, the way we behave. What are some things that we can look for in the students that we're serving and supporting? Difficulty concentrating, right? And so we're having this conversation, but we can see clearly based on their physiology, their body language, and how they're responding that they're not really present, right? They're present as far as their body is in the seat and we're having a conversation, but they're not able to concentrate for whatever reason, right? Thoughts of suicide, right? And being able to identify some of the clues that exist that help us, or should at least alert, a light bulb to say, hey, that's something that we need to dig a little bit deeper on. That's not just you saying certain things, but that's something that we should have a conversation about. So thoughts to suicide, feelings, right? So lack of energy, right? Sleeping a whole lot and waking up and still feeling tired, or not being able to sleep, right? Lack of energy, not having the physical, mental, and emotional energy to navigate through life's stressors, right? Hopelessness and helplessness, right? I can't see that future, right? And so I'm in this state of hopelessness, and in this state where I'm not even going to try because I can't see, I can't visualize what that thing is that I'm working towards or can be working towards. Behaviors. I mentioned sleeping too much or too little, withdrawing, right? Isolation, right? These are all different signs, different symptoms that can help us to recognize when a student is not doing well. And not to say that we're diagnosing any student because they exhibit these signs or symptoms, right? That's not the point of this, but it is to recognize some of those signs, some of those things that we can be mindful of as we're having these conversations, right? If you're speaking to a student and they mention, multiple times during the span of a week, 2 weeks, hey, I haven't been getting sleep, right? Maybe the second time or the third time, maybe dig a little bit deeper on that. How long have you been struggling with sleep? Have you identified certain causes? Is it because you're just kind of staying up playing games, or staying up doing homework, or trying to maintain your grade to stay in the program? Like what? Give me some context around that, because you keep mentioning that, right? Rather than the opposite of that is, well, they're a college student, they're not supposed to sleep anyway, right? And not to say that anyone here is doing that, but being able to recognize those things, and then when we see it in real time, having those questions, asking those clarifying questions. Sometimes it's difficult to have those conversations. Raise your hand if for you it can be difficult when you see the obvious signs. It can be difficult for you to have the conversation. This is a safe space for being honest. Anyone in the virtual room or in person, just by a show of hands, it's difficult to have the conversation. Let's just be honest. Okay?
Depends on the context.
Depends on the context.
If I'm in my professional role, it's not difficult at all. I'm trained.
Yeah.
If I'm dealing with an irritable daughter.
Yeah. That's a good point. And so I am speaking, generally speaking. Generally speaking, it's difficult to have the conversation. Generally speaking. Okay. And that's pretty common as far as we talked about earlier, right? Where there is this shared experience around mental health, which is we don't talk about that stuff. So of course it's difficult to have the conversation because we grew up not talking about that stuff, right? But that's okay. But let's start there, right? So in having the conversation, there are ways that we can engage in conversation where we create this connection, because the goal is connection. I heard it mentioned earlier is acknowledge feelings, right? If someone shares something, the last thing you want to do is invalidate their experience by saying, that's just nothing, or that's just a part of it, right? But no, that's their actual experience. So we're going to talk about certain things that we can do as far as when the opportunity presents itself to have the conversation, we can do so in strategic ways, right? Not in like we're robots and we're following the script or none of that, but it's recognizing that we are human beings experiencing the human experience. And that is a collective experience. And if we can approach it in that way, then it's easier to then find opportunities for connection. So this time we're going to do this activity, but you're going to stay right where you are. I just want you to engage with the person to the right or left of you, or the right and the left of you. You can pick one person or two people, but find somebody, at least one person. For our virtual, I want you to just kind of think of this with yourself for right now. But we're talking about difficult conversations, right? And when we talk about resilience, and resilience being the ability to bounce back from adversity, in developing resilience, having difficult conversations plays a big role in that. Prime example, I shared the experience that a young lady had in that counseling session where the counselor fell asleep, right? That young lady can either, have the conversation right then and there, or leave that situation and never talk about it with anyone, or leave that situation, get an opportunity to assess how it impacted her, and then revisit that conversation. But whichever route that young lady chooses, in order to bounce back from adversity quickly, resilience, we gotta have the difficult conversations with ourselves and then with other people. So I would like for you all to share with each other, right? And this one will be a brief one. We'll do just 60 seconds or so. Share a time where you had a difficult conversation. And this doesn't have to be in relation to mental health. It can be anything in general. And if you can think of something, great. If you can't, that's fine too. But I want you to think of a time when you did have a difficult conversation and what was the result of you making a conscious effort and decision to have the conversation, no matter how difficult it was or how difficult it felt. So next 60 seconds, I want you to just engage with the person to the right or left or both and share that time and share the result of it. Ready? And go.
With her, or you want to? You go with either students, staff.
Never, rarely goes that way.
All right, we have about 20 seconds before we bring it back. 20 seconds.
I'd rather have the conversation in front of the person who's in my mind.
All right, we got 5 seconds before we wrap it up. Three, 2, 1. All right, let's bring it back. Bring it back, bring it back, bring it back. All right, so for our virtual attendees, I'd love for you, if anyone wants to share an experience that you've had as far as having a difficult conversation and the result of that. But while you're figuring out whether you want to share or not, we're going to bring it to our in-person attendees as far as who would like to share an experience that you've had as far as having a difficult conversation. What was the result? What happened as a result of that? So see a couple of laughs already. Okay, who'd like to share?
Yeah.
Did someone call someone else?
I'll share.
Yeah, please.
So recently, we have a small cohort, which is really nice because we get to know our students very well. But I had a student who was not submitting homework and scheduling appointments with me and ghosting, which was not typical. So I went into it with an academic improvement form, we're going to talk about this, but then I said, I want to grant you grace. I want to know what's going on here. And it ended up being a really positive.
Oh, wow.
This person was suffering from a mental health issue and it ended up being a very positive, how can I help you be successful? And so I went in, with okay, let's find out,
Yeah,
anyway, it ended up, it was a difficult, nobody likes,
yeah,
I certainly don't like academic improvement forums,
yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really good point, because we never know what anyone is experiencing, even though they have the biggest smile or they are, super engaged, we never know until we have the conversation. So thanks. Anyone else who would like to share a time you had a difficult conversation and what was the result? Anyone had a difficult conversation and it went completely opposite, it went completely left? And you're like, dang, I shouldn't have said nothing. Anyone have one of those? Yeah, those, and that's a part of the game. It's like, we have to accept both sides of it, right? Yeah, so we have anyone virtually that, okay, awesome. So again, going back to difficult conversations, I think one of the cool things about who's in this room today is you get an opportunity to model what it looks like to have the conversation that is difficult and also model what it looks like to bounce back from adversity. I mentioned earlier, more is caught than taught. So I'm sure, everyone here kind of growing up in whatever household you grew up in, there were more things that you learned by watching than you learned from parents or guardians or whoever raised you telling you actually to do that thing. I actually can remember very little, what my parents said, but I remember a lot of things that I saw and it shaped how I showed up as an individual. So in the position that you're in, it's critically important to embrace both sides of the spectrum as far as the result of having difficult conversations. Sometimes it will go completely left and you're like, man, that was hard. And that did not, have a positive result, right? But that's okay, that's part of it, right? But then also having that difficult conversation leads to an experience where this student now knows you're a safe person. And if they're ever in a position, they know that Dr. Noah is a safe person, right? I can reach out to her. Like, we had this conversation and then I found out in this difficult conversation that she will give me grace and she will understand and she will ask me questions versus not, right? And so being able to model that, but embrace the process of it, even though it's difficult.
What?
What'd you say?
Did you say?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Do another two.
No, you can't. So some of the things, and I put this here, but we've already mentioned a lot of these things as far as what's going on in between the ears of the students that you serve and support. I'm afraid I'm gonna have this label, right? And I've heard this, I don't know how many of you may have heard this, but I don't want to go and seek support because what if I am dealing with depression and it's gonna be on my record, whatever that record is, forever? Right? Anyone heard that from a student? Right? And so being able to combat that misconception with the truth, right? HIPAA protects you from things like that, right? Right? So it's being able to identify, hey, what are their, perceptions, preconceived notions, understandings of this thing, mental health, mental illness, so that we can come into the conversation understanding that this may be their reality. And we may have to do a little bit more, extend a little bit more grace because of who we're working with in order to get them the support that they need. So a couple of things we kind of touched on this as far as looking out for certain signs, right? And knowing that it's a sign. When I hear it, when I see it, when I observe it, hey, that's a sign, right? That's not something that I should just let persist and act as if I didn't see it. But knowing these things and being able to address them effectively. So having the difficult conversation. And I mentioned the importance of connection. Connection happens when we communicate. Connection doesn't happen because I think I have the solution to what you're going through. And you just haven't utilized or engaged with my solution. That's not connection. Connection is we communicate, and a large percentage, right? Like I'm talking about big, right? More than we think. Large percentage of effective communication is nonverbal. I think it's more than 50%, right? And so when we understand that, hey, effective communication is actually me doing more listening than speaking, me doing more observing than speaking, then that helps us to communicate well, which then leads to the connection, right? So communicate early, communicate often, always find opportunities. And it can be the smallest thing. And in your eyes, it's the smallest thing. But there were certain gestures that my guidance counselor, when I was in high school, that he did or said that made me realize this guy cares about me. It was the smallest thing. Hey, Abraham, I like your new shoes. I was like, you recognize I got new shoes? It's the smallest things, but in the role that you have in regards to the students that you serve and support, it is those small things that make a significant difference, right? So communicate early, communicate often. So I want to actually, a few things I want to highlight as far as the communicate early, communicate often, right? When you're thinking about addressing or communicating specific signs, clues, behaviors that you've identified, there are certain prerequisites that you want to be mindful of, right? You never want to put yourself in a position where you've identified certain things, but you also have other priorities that don't allow you to be in a position to create this connection, right? One example is I've recognized certain things, but I also have certain priorities that don't allow me to sit with this person, engage with them, right? And give them the time that they need in order to communicate and connect. And so I am not going to engage at the time, until I'm able to, right? And there are different ways that we can go around doing that. So something as simple as, hey, if I've recognized certain signs, right? I don't want to engage with this student if I don't have the time to engage with them. Because again, nonverbals, right? So if you're looking at your watch while you're having this very important conversation, or you're dozing off because you're tired, or whatever the case is, right? It's those little things that the student sees, and it may give the sign that this is either not a safe person, or I should not be sharing because this person isn't listening. And maybe that's not the case, right? So just being mindful of these things when I talk about communicate early, communicate often. And I have resources here, and I'm going to share that with you. You also have it on that PDF, on that guidebook that you have as well. All right, so some exercises, tools, again, with resilience. One thing that I noticed in working with students is that
Oh, it's the
dust storm. I wonder if our audience. We can't hear that, right? It's not just me. Okay. Wonder if.
It's coming for just the drive back. On the video.
Oh, you can hear it on your end?
Columbus, side 15.
I wonder if I.
She does it, that's about the time she gets. And so,
So this one?
Yeah, because that's that really bad. So,
it's living in Orangeburg.
Yeah.
The other day, we had the search, Katrina, then broke the open, so I understand it to raise them or something. She said they had periods of totally, it was really scary. For some periods going south. You don't see that, that's up on our road down here. It was really bad.
But I did, when I was when I had to go to Denny.
That's fine.
I did say go to, yes, yeah.
Been doing good since all the time. Yeah, no worries. Okay, so we can do that.
Just like that, we had the screen here.
Oh,
To your presentation.
okay, got it. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for Victoria helping us out. All right, so when we talk about resilience, right? One thing that I've noticed in working with students from all different backgrounds, there is a lack of tools, right? Tools to effectively cope with stress. And so when we don't have the education or know the tools that can also work, then we're more likely to drink until we don't feel those feelings anymore. Or smoke until we don't feel those feelings anymore. Or do X, Y, Z, you pick whatever the vice is, you pick whatever the coping mechanism is, until we don't experience those emotions or feelings anymore, right? And so this seems to be almost like a shared experience across the board as far as what students are lacking. They don't know the other tools. And if they do know the tools, they don't know the right time to use them, right? And so we talk about resiliency and it being the ability to bounce back from adversity. The reason it's very important to share tools for well-being is so that the student that you're working with or yourself, you know, when is the time that I engage with these tools? There are certain tools that are great for you. And there are other tools that just don't work for you. I remember I did a breathing exercise with a group not too long ago. And I asked everyone after the breathing exercise, what was your experience? And if you can elaborate a little bit. And I heard a couple of people say that they got really anxious from deep breathing. And they got very anxious because they weren't able to breathe deeply. And so they realized that, man, my breath is very shallow and I can't hold it for the amount. And I was thinking to myself, wow, that's an interesting experience. And that's your experience. So what that tells me as an individual is that, hey, the next time I'm feeling stressed, maybe I'm not going to try deep breathing, but I'll try a different tool because I don't want to be more stressed, right, while I'm stressed. And so the goal is to understand all the tools that exist, or as many tools as we possibly can, that are positive, that are tools for positive coping, right? Right, that lead to a positive result so that, well, there's that part. And then bridging the gap as far as this is when you use this tool. These are times when you can use it, right? Because it's one thing to know the tools. It's another thing to utilize the tool when you need it, right? Which takes a lot of work, practice, and understanding and repetition and all these different things. So I wanted to share these tools, and I'll also make sure that you have these slides. I'll get it to Shelly and Alexa, then we can figure out how to get it to everyone as well. That way you can have the different links and all these other parts of the presentation as well. But there are different tools, right? So breathing exercises. I remember the first time I worked with a therapist, and she introduced me to, I can't remember what it was. It's like this, I can't think of it right now, but essentially it's teaching you how to breathe, right? And I thought, I mean, who needs to be taught how to breathe? Like I do it, I wake up and I start breathing. But in learning how to breathe, I learned that I didn't know how to breathe because I learned after learning how to breathe that I could utilize my breath to change my physiology, to change my psychology. And so in that same scenario where before I thought that I would have to do X, Y, Z, 3,000, 4,000, whatever thing that was to feel less stress, I now had a practical tool that I can engage with to feel less stress, which was my breathing, right? And so tools like deep breathing, mindfulness activities. I did a trip a few, well, years ago now, at least like 4 maybe 5 years ago. And we, as in, I went to a study abroad trip, went to Europe for about a month. And as part of that trip, we were studying psychology and different mindfulness practices and the historical component. And we had a chance to spend the day with Buddhist nuns. And man, was that an experience. You talk about a different way of living. Like, we spent some time in the monastery, and just their way of, going about day to day, right? When we eat, we're eating. That's it. When we drink tea, that's all we're doing. Right? There's no driving while I'm trying to, get as much fries there's none of that. Right? And I got exposed to different tools, something as simple as mindful eating during my lunch hour. I'm not on my phone in one hand, on my laptop on the other hand, and then trying to, right? But that's not just you, that's a lot of us, right? Mindful eating. I am going to actually taste the food that I'm putting in my mouth. Right? That's a concept that I didn't even think about. But these are tools that are for my well-being, right? Labeling your emotions. Some of you may be familiar with this tool, the feelings wheel. I remember, being exposed to the feelings wheel. And if you aren't familiar with it, I would Google it. But being exposed to it, before being exposed to it, I thought I only had, two real emotions or feelings, right? You're angry or you're happy. That's it. Right? That's it. Like, I didn't know you can feel betrayed. I didn't know, you can feel, upset in a way that's not angry. I didn't know these things. I was like, it's this or that. And then I see this wheel with all these different emotions, some I couldn't even pronounce. And it was like, oh, no, I actually do feel that one. I just didn't know it was a thing, right? And being able to label it, right? Being able to have the language for what students are experiencing, and even for yourself, what you're experiencing helps you to build from that foundation, right? So another tool. Sounds, music. Anyone listen to music to get you in different types of moods? Yeah? What about for either relaxing or going to sleep? Anyone listen to sounds or music or anything that you don't mind sharing? Uh-oh, I don't know if I want to ask.
I have this weird thing that I discovered several other single women also use. Is if I can't go to sleep, I turn to forensic files. And it's like,
wow.
missing at a level, the stories about people being murdered in their bed. Sleep, and I've encountered several other women that this works for as well. Something about the movie and the voice. Wow. Oh, he does sound very sick. And then I don't know. Dr. Summers, it agitates her. If we travel together, I can't listen to forensic files. But to me, it's just so interesting.
That is interesting.
I just thought about it.
You've used forensic files?
Yeah.
Wow, yeah. That is interesting. That's the first. I've heard that one. Yeah.
Craig, you're saying, me too.
Oh, we have more. Wow, okay.
Try it.
He's like, try it, yeah. That's good. Yeah, I've never heard that. Yeah. And that was very specific too. Yeah. I've heard turn on the TV and let something play, but that was very specific. So thanks for sharing. I'm sure someone else will benefit from it. Go home and try it. Yeah. So anything else, like sounds, maybe a specific song or a type of music that you use to kind of wind down, relax, or kind of get yourself in a certain mood? Yes.
So there's actually such a thing as informal music meditation.
Oh.
So for example, in listening to classical music, singling out a particular instrument.
Yeah.
Or
Oh, that's fun.
piece of sound and listening for it as it moves through the song.
That's really cool.
Doing it.
Yeah, that sounds very cool.
Just a music meditation.
Yeah, that is, yeah. I'll try that one out. I don't know about the forensic files, but I'll try that one. I like music, yeah. Nothing against forensic files. Someone shared in the virtual. It's the voice. I love forensic forensic. So, oh wow, this is a shared experience. Look at that. Wow. So being outside in nature, right? And I know maybe sometimes here it's more, it's warm, you probably don't want to be outside too long. Right. But one thing that I hear is a good practice for a lot of people as far as engaging with tools is engaging with nature, right? So I've even heard, and I've done it, right? Taking my shoes off, taking my socks off, putting my toes in the sand, in the dirt, in the grass, and feeling that, right? Those are different practices and tools that we can engage in. Any tools that maybe you are aware of or utilize that is not listed here that you'd like to share with the group? I think that music meditation, I think that's really cool. I'm gonna look into that and try it. But any other ones that are not listed? Yeah.
I don't know if this is a personal quirk, but multiple times a day, I find myself humming a lullaby in my head, like need to merge. And all of a sudden it's a lullaby. I didn't realize I did it until I started making myself soothe all day long with this lullaby. And is it just me? Do other people? Yeah, you're just
I come and I found out that there is a physiological basis for it. If you pair it with breathing, so for example, breathing in a deep inhale and then humming it out, it's a soothing response. Very self-soothing, like literally spot on. So I find myself humming and now I know why.
I think that's good. And I think the more we share and learn other people's tools and experiences, it broadens our toolbox or belt, or you know what I mean? Because, there are certain things that will work for some that won't work for others. I think I heard in one of the groups when we did the breakout is there are just some students that will never sit down with a counselor. And how do we help them? Let's get creative, right? Right. What self-help resources or tools can we share? Because for whatever reason, they will never step foot. And that's okay if that's their decision, but how can we support them? So thanks.
So tapping is one that's gotten quite a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Recently. And many people do sort of numbers exercises. For some reason, numbers are kind of like tapping, counting things.
Yeah.
And that's the old count the sheep kind of thing, but
yeah,
the counting thing seems to soothe a lot of people. But tapping's gotten a lot of experience, as there are quite a few self-acupressure things.
Yeah.
That people can do where you put pressure on certain specific points. That can be very calming.
That's good.
I mean, like social connections are important. So
yes.
How people develop into it, like can I call my mom, can I call other friends.
Yeah.
Always have like some perspective of what's like that, or just hearing them on other days kind of changed my perspective or reality. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, like having a creative outlet can be really wonderful for well-being. So trying something new, and if painting has always been something that you're interested in, and you just go get like, from the dollar store, just like try it out. And it doesn't need to be a masterpiece, but it's just like the act of doing something creative and making something from nothing can be very gratifying.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And I think that, I always tell my folks, I get it, you write papers all day, every day. If you're tired of words, you can still get it out. Just use images, colors, whatever you want.
Yeah. That's good. Awesome. So I talked about the framework a little bit ago, and some of you may remember this from hearing me speak at some point. But essentially, I had this aha moment years ago. And I don't know if any of you have had an aha moment where for just a moment you thought to yourself, I think I'm a genius. Anyone ever have that? Is it like just me? Is that pride talking right now? Is that like no one else? Am I by myself? Like, oh my gosh, I think I discovered something. No? Okay, well, I guess I got a couple. Okay. So I had this moment where I don't know what it was, where I was doing some digging as far as like gold, right? And the process gold goes through or must go through in order to become this commodity that is extremely valuable and that we can use in many different forms. And so in doing some basic digging and researching, I found that, you know, gold goes through this purification process. And in that process, it experiences extreme heat and extreme pressure, right? But if it can withstand that process, right, that purification process, it becomes that beautiful, you know, valuable commodity that so many, you know, love and a lot of people spend a lot of money on, right? And as I was doing this, I started to think to myself, man, that sounds a lot like the human experience as far as, right, extreme pressure, extreme heat. But when we realize that we go through that process and get on the other end of it, we have more depth as far as who we are as individuals. Sometimes we get to prioritize our priorities in ways that we wouldn't have been able to before. Sometimes we start to find out that we are much stronger than we thought we were. We start to realize that I'm a resilient individual. And I come up with this framework, the HOT framework. How many remember this, right? Kind of, sort of. So HOT is an acronym that stands for being honest, being open, and being transparent. And so when I say being honest, open, and transparent, we go back to that self-awareness check. And then we also have that difficult conversation with ourselves and others. And then we also make an intentional effort for connection. So let me break it down. Being honest starts with ourselves, right? Anyone remember those 3 questions that I asked myself a little bit ago? And can anyone share what those 3 questions are? Yes.
How is my thinking? How is my, say again, how am I feeling? How am I behaving?
Yeah. And so in asking myself these questions, it allows me to be honest, because at that point, I'm just reflecting on self, right? I'm not trying to answer anyone else's question or portray some sort of image, right? But I'm honestly asking myself these questions so I know how I'm doing. Would you agree that sometimes we go about life just kind of saying things and on autopilot that we tend to forget how we actually are doing, right? And it's very common to just be going, that we don't take the time to recognize how we are, right? So that's the honest piece, is where I'm honest with myself, right? As I ask myself these questions, I'm not holding back, right? This is for me. And if I have to journal my answers to these questions in order for me to get it out, or if I need to just say it out loud, like so I can actually hear myself, I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to be honest with myself. And then we go to being open, right? This is when I am open to doing something different, right? Albert Einstein put it this way, it was a quote, he says, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, yet expecting different results. And so I keep avoiding the difficult conversation, but I'm trying to build connection with this person. Maybe I should try the difficult conversation and that would change the result as far as my connection with this person. So being open is when I identify, here are the areas where I have to approach it with an open mind, unless I want the same result. Sometimes it's having a difficult conversation. Sometimes it's trying the tool that we shared, right? Sometimes it's doing XYZ thing, even though it's uncomfortable, so that we can get a different result. And then transparent, so the last one, transparent. This is when we've already done the self-assessment. We've recognized the areas where we can engage in these areas to grow as an individual. And we show up with our authentic and trusted team, our support network, and we show up. Remember earlier I said not everyone is a safe person, but it's important to identify who those safe people are. So we show up with these people or person, and we're like, this is where I'm at today, right? And it may look ugly, and it may not be, you know, what I typically look like or how I'm typically doing, but this is where I'm at. And what I found a lot of times is when we're in those positions, we're not necessarily looking for an answer or a solution to the feelings or emotions. We just want to know it's a safe space. And understanding that it's a safe space, oftentimes that in and of itself is the solution. So how can we be hot? We're talking about resiliency. And one thing that I know about human beings is that we are innately resilient. Like, oh my goodness. I see way too many, you know, examples. I see too much evidence to try to convince me to believe that we're not resilient, right? As a human being, I've seen people bounce back from very difficult things. I was in the gym maybe a year ago, and I'm on the stepper thing, and I try to start with the stepper when I want to challenge myself, and I try to see how fast I can go without tripping and falling off the stair. So I do crazy things like that sometimes, but it's all good. So I'm on the stepper, and I start to ramp up the speed, and I'm like going at it, and I literally almost fell. But here's the thing, I almost fell because right across from me, I see this guy with one arm benching 155 pounds. I said, no, he didn't. So it threw me so off guard that I almost like fell off and I'm looking at the guy, and I had to talk to him. I didn't like jump off in that moment, but after I got done with the stair, I went over to him and was like, what's your story, dude? Like, first of all, you're here with one arm, and you're not only just lifting weight, but 155 pounds, that weighs more than a lot of people I know. And out of all the things and reasons or excuses or anything that you could have come up with to say, you know, I'm not doing that, you made a conscious decision to show up. So I've seen way too much for someone to convince me that human beings aren't resilient. Like, it's just innate, it's in our nature, right? And that's one grand example of it, but there are things like, and I heard it earlier, like I get out of bed, right? Put my shoes on, brush my teeth, show up for work. I show up to the job done. For many seasons of my life, that was a celebration, like a huge celebration. The fact that I got out of bed, right? And that was me showing myself that I am resilient. Going back to the mental health continuum, when we think about our lives and we think about the experiences that we have in our lives, how can we ensure that we are giving ourselves the upper hand? We're giving ourselves the best possible situation to progress, to bounce back from adversity. I would put myself in a very difficult situation if I was struggling with depression, and I did this in real life, right? Struggling with depression, was already diagnosed, was already in treatment, and I had the same expectation that I had when I was doing well. And so not considering the fact that, hey, you're going through something right now, and you have to, whether it's lower the bar, right? You have to figure out a way to celebrate those small wins, to figure out what these small wins are. And sometimes if I can't do it for myself, I need to find someone that can say, man, you're actually doing X, Y, Z, like good, great job, right? But the goal is to put ourselves in the best position possible to not only recognize our resilience, but also put ourselves in a position to grow in the area of resilience, right? Having an attitude of gratitude, that builds our resilience. When we can recognize the things that we have to be grateful for, that actually puts us in a better position to do more. And sometimes it's not a concept that's understood, but being able to celebrate those quote small things, to recognize those small things, that fuels you for that next goal, that next accomplishment. Not neglecting those quote small things with our eyes on that next thing, but being able to do that simultaneously. So can I be hot? I'm just kidding. I have nothing else to be hot about. Be hot this whole session. So I would love to hear from everyone here as far as we're going to do this last activity together. Before we do that, I want to hear from everyone. There were certain reasons why you attended today's session, right? There were certain reasons why you said, I'm going to be here because I want to learn so-and-so, either for myself or for someone that I serve, I support. Maybe you had a picture of a student in mind specifically, right? Or maybe not. But I would love for anyone who feels comfortable sharing something that you have taken away from this session that is practical enough for you to put into whether it's what you're doing professionally, as far as your role here at NMSU, or personally that you can utilize in relation to why you showed up here. Or maybe what you took away today has nothing to do with why you showed up, but you still got that thing. So anyone would like to share before we go into this last role-playing exercise with my guy, Tim? Any takeaways, things that are practical that you can see how you can incorporate it in your profession or your personal life? Yes.
So when I came here, I was looking for something that I could apply for a student who might get triggered during clinical, and I need them to pull it together so that they can make it to the end of clinical. And it was something that we had said here, the breathing exercise, but then also something that I saw in, I don't know what you were calling it, handbook or the thing that we looked at.
Yeah.
And it was breathe in and breathe out.
Yeah.
Breathe out. And it's handy enough that I think that it's, yes, you have it with you during clinical and you can use it without anybody noticing that you're applying this right now, and then we can talk about it later.
Yeah. And something like that is very handy, especially when you're about to take a test, right? And no one notices what you're doing, and you're kind of, I don't know if everyone saw the hand activity, but you're kind of just like going, but you know tool enough to know that, hey, I'm doing some deep breathing right now. But it's that practical that, you know, just that tool alone can be a difference maker for many students. So thanks for sharing that. Any other kind of practical takeaways? Yes.
I like the HOT acronym. It's been my observation that people who end up finally trying to hurt themselves and end up in the hospital, those three things are not what's happening. They're not telling anything. They're not honest with themselves. They are not telling others that they're having this trouble. Then they start isolating away. The longer they stay isolated away, the more convinced they become that they're not important, right? That I'd be better off dead. Everybody else would be better off if I was dead. And then when an incident occurs and their family and friends all come out, patients will often say, I had no idea so many people cared, right? Because they've closed out everybody for a while, and nobody's quite realized how isolated they've become. And then they don't think they matter. So I like that.
That's a great observation. Yeah. Yes.
I really think that's the point, and how a client got into session with me in the first place, how they referred him to my heart, something about how do I tell him how to stay hot, how to use those to be honest with himself, to be transparent with people in his life, so they know he's not happy all the time. That's okay.
Yeah. Normalizing the human experience. I think that makes a big difference, because we tell ourselves those things like, you know, I'm the only one going through this, no one will understand.
Everybody else do better than me.
Yeah. And then we don't realize, no, there's a large majority of people who have this shared experience, and being able to have that shared experience, it brings connection. Yes.
You know, depression and anxiety are like nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. Everybody gets some. And sometimes you can just be good to yourself.
It's a great visual.
You can just do good home care and you get through it. Sometimes you gotta go to the ER, get a liter of fluids, then
Yeah.
you'll be okay. And sometimes you have to go stay in the hospital for 3 days.
Yeah,
And if they're neglected, it can kill people,
yeah,
right? So,
yeah.
like, try to put it on a continuous, they can recognize if they're getting into trouble.
Mhm.
When it is, they just need to increase their self-care, right?
Yep.
When they can have one level of intervention, when it's more serious and when they're really at risk.
Yeah. So good.
Great analogy.
Yeah, another good, yeah, great observation, great analogy, great picture, right? I can just visualize it right here, right now. All right, so for our last role playing kind of, what we're working on together, we can kind of come together as either groups of 2 or groups of 3, but we're gonna go down the, back to that guidebook. So if you need it again, scan the QR code or pull it up on your phone. And one thing about this guidebook, you can print it out. So I actually encourage you to print it out and just have it handy, right? Whenever you need it, whenever you want to refer to it, share it with the student or whatever that looks like. But we're going to go to page 12. And it should say my safety plan. So speaking of a lot of what we've heard, actually, just a couple of seconds ago about knowing when do I seek support or I've gotten at this point and now I'm in crisis. We're going to talk through how we can support Tim. So our guide today is Tim. And if I can get help from one person in here to read some of the experiences, the unique experiences that Tim has as a student. And we'll say Tim is at NMSU, right? Since we're here. So any volunteers to read these different bullets? Tell us about Tim. Yes.
Do I read all of them?
Yes, please.
Okay. Tim is taking 5 classes and working part-time, away from his family and hometown. He is taking classes online and has made it hard for him to make new friends and stay connected to his current friends on campus. He feels alone, stressed, and is wondering if he made the right choice when coming to college. No one in his family has graduated from college before, and he's thinking about dropping out.
So Tim, does this sound like any of the students that maybe you serve and support in
October and March.
You said October and March?
Yeah.
Right, so question about Tim. Is Tim in crisis right now based on reading this and not having too much context as far as anything, but just off of reading this, is it safe to assume that Tim is in crisis? Raise your hand for yes, if you're like, and I know it's hard because I'm not giving you any context. But without any context, is it safe to assume that Tim is in a crisis situation? Okay.
Yes, it's early crisis.
Okay, good point. Talk about triage, right? Okay, so is it safe to assume for those of you who are saying he's not in crisis, but it would be helpful for him to engage in certain services or resources? Show of hands. Okay, so whether he is in crisis or not, we're gonna go over a tool that is highly beneficial. Because here's the thing. It's better to engage in the resources before you need them than to need the resources and not know what they are and not have access to them, right? So page 12 is a safety plan. And I know, it talks about, safety plan, for the most part, we hear about it in the context of suicide prevention, but I want you to broaden our scope and take a more comprehensive approach to this safety plan, because a lot of these questions and ways that we can engage with Tim or insert name here as far as NMSU student or any person that you engage with, or even yourself, there are things that we can be mindful of and create potential solutions for before we ever reach crisis, right? So I'm gonna we'll actually find a partner or two. So I'll give you about 10 or so seconds. If you are tuned in virtually, you don't have to break out in groups now because we're gonna go through it together. But if you can find a partner or 2 partners. All right. right, so we got our partners. So I'm gonna go through steps 1 through 5. And essentially what we're doing here is we are helping Tim develop a plan for himself, right? We don't want to wait for him to be in crisis. And then at that point, he's not even aware of which way to go, where to turn, what resources he has access to. In advance, we're going to come up with a plan. All right, so the first question, and as I ask these questions, I want you to kind of discuss with your partner, or if you're tuned in virtually, kind of jot down notes for yourself or think about it. But the first one is warning signs. So I'm talking with Tim. Hey, Tim, what do you feel in your body when you're feeling sad or upset? What thoughts do you have when you're feeling down? And notice in this question, he can't say yes or no. So what are some things I want you to now discuss with your group? What are some things that maybe Tim may share as it relates to these questions? So I want you to discuss that for a couple of seconds. What are some things that Tim might share in regards to the first and second question under number 1?
What thoughts do you have? Speak up.
All right, I know it's pretty fast, but we're gonna move to the second one. We're gonna move to the second one. So the second question, or the second step. So effective coping strategies. Right? What are things, so I'm talking to Tim, what are some things that make you feel better when you're sad or upset? This can be drawing, playing a sport, playing a game, going for a walk, talking to a friend, watching a funny video. What are some things that Tim might say in relation to the question of what are some things that make you feel better when you're feeling sad or upset? So you can discuss for a couple seconds. And I want you to think about some of the things in relation to NMSU students, right? What are some things that make them up when you ask them, hey, what do you do to make you feel better?
Recognizing. But
all right, so we're gonna move on to the next one. So with this next step, we're talking a little bit here on support networks and specifically informal support networks. So we're asking Tim, hey, who are the people you trust who can help you when you're feeling down? So you can discuss that for a couple seconds.
yeah, we're answering this.
Yeah.
Sounds like a setup. Do its job.
All right, so moving on to number 4, so professional help and support. So back to the support network, this one is more formal as far as different services they can engage in. So the question is, do you know any phone numbers for people, or do you know people who can help you when you're really sad or scared or feeling down, feeling upset? All right, so we're gonna move to the last one, number 5. And for number 5, we're actually gonna do number 5 together. So we're gonna move on to the last one, number 5, and we're gonna do it together. So steps I can take to make my environment safer. And so when I talk about safer, I want you to think in terms of the students that you serve here at NMSU, and not just physically safe, right? Emotionally safe is an aspect that I want you to consider. Psychologically safe is an aspect that I want you to consider as well. So as it relates to making my environment safer, and we're gonna do this together versus in your groups, I'd love to hear some of the things that come up in conversation or some of the things that you hear that make these environments unsafe for students, for Tim. And that can be physically, emotionally, psychologically unsafe. What are some things that you see, you hear, or come up that make the environment unsafe?
We kind of had a little discussion of this, but living in the dark,
What do you mean by that?
pulling all the blinds down, isolating away, staying in the dark day and night,
Yeah.
right? And not having anybody over. So we feel like, raise the blinds, let the sunshine in during the day, so that you sleep tonight. Invite a friend over to watch a movie. Don't stay by yourself all the time.
That's so good. And that's an aspect that we don't typically consider, because that does change the dynamics as far as the environment. I mean, I came in earlier today before anyone got here and the blinds were closed. And I mean, that's not a bad thing, but I noticed how the environment shifted when I just kind of opened it just a little bit. And those are little things that can change the environment that we don't think about.
And light is very important to mood.
Yes.
Light during the daytime is very important to mood. And we have these wonderful severe clear skies here in New Mexico, with the best light ever. You just get it.
Yeah, you're gonna feel it. Yeah. Anything else that makes the environment unsafe? Yes.
And thinking about our college students with their social development and their identity development and those things kind of colliding right now. Feeling spaces where they feel judged or perceived judgment is like huge. So like, I'm always recommending like, the clubs around here to have like affinity spaces where they, for example, like the LGBT resource center here, they can we're not worried about being judged in that space, just as an example, but yeah, seems very relevant to our age group.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anything else makes it unsafe?
Also, like being selective about information that they're consuming. Like sometimes people get too caught up on like politics or like the Palestinian Israel conflict.
Yes. Interesting perspective. Thanks for sharing that. Yes.
That's what I was gonna say, doom scrolling.
What's that?
Like doom scrolling, where you're like, this idea of like, intake, like.
Oh, you like go down the rabbit hole?
In just
Okay.
doom.
Yeah.
And what you're
Oh,
feeding
man.
yourself with.
Yeah.
And also, not forensic files, no push there. But really, psychologically and emotionally, when we talk to our students and they're getting all of their information from social media and just taking it in without filter, that can really create some kind of very intrusive thoughts and just a judgment that's not really there, but they think it's there. So I think we have to be really careful of that as well.
That's really good. Thanks for sharing.
And sometimes there's a website where somebody has a similar problem, where they're gradually filming themselves dying kind of idea. And these students like hook onto that and immerse themselves in the misery, a secondary misery of someone else who's like talking to the whole world and posting videos of themselves so depressed. And often they're thinking of killing themselves. And these can go on for days and weeks.
Yeah.
Some of those websites where people are like TikTok and stuff where they're
Yeah.
showing their progression into death around their eating disorder or their own depression or whatever.
Wow.
And it's really unhealthy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
One thing that I come across at the health center, we get like partner abuse, family abuse. So they'll come in with that person, they'll write, telling us she's gonna end it. So they tell us, privately, so that's a danger to them in my household.
Yeah.
And so how do they get away from that? I mean, I can't tell them.
Yeah.
But maybe once they do go back there, because the providers already notified, now that person in.
Yeah.
And they can talk to them or hand them off.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. And there are certain things that are outside of our control as far as, in many cases, all we can do is share information or try to influence in a way that can be conducive for the situation that Tim is in, or insert name here, your student that you work with. So I think that kind of summarizes, what we've talked about today, and ensuring that our approach is comprehensive in nature as far as resilience is concerned, supporting students, in even supporting ourselves. It's comprehensive, meaning there is no one size fits all, right? And it's comprehensive in that there are many different aspects of the human being that ultimately affect, their state of well-being. So what we see and what we hear is it doesn't just start and end there, but there are different components to consider. And that should lead us to become creative in the way we support ourselves and creative in the ways that we support students. I think, and this is I've been hot all day, right? So I guess just keep it going. It's hot outside. Might as well bring it inside. But one thing that I do for myself is, my wife told me stop saying it this way, but I can't find a better way to articulate it yet. But I trick my brain to do certain things. So one thing that I've learned in just understanding human psychology is many times your brain can't tell the difference between reality and your imagination. And so when I want to get myself to do certain things that I don't in reality want to do, I try to trick myself into my brain seeing this thing a certain way, and then my behavior follows suit. And that's one example of just getting creative in our approach is, right, this student will never walk into, and we don't want to say never, but there are certain scenarios where they will never talk to a mental health professional, right? Because of whatever reason. Well, that's the situation. How can we get creative with our approach to reach them, even though that is a decision that they're making? And then coming back to us, getting creative with how we develop skills and tools to bounce back from adversity. Maybe you've never tried forensic files before. Maybe it's time you give it a try. Right? You're having trouble sleeping. What's the word to that?
Nightmares.
Nightmares. Well, that is a pretty bad. Yeah. Right. But I'm being funny, but honestly, it's if something isn't working and the goal is forward progression, how can we get creative, right? And as human beings, just as we are resilient in nature, we are creative in nature, right? We can create stuff. Like this phone that I have, this iPhone that I love, somebody thought this thing up and they created it. And so the more we can tap into our creative nature, we can identify and realize solutions that can be conducive for ourselves and the students that we serve and support. So with that being said, has this been helpful for you? Did you realize it's 4:00? This was a lot of fun. I want to hear some feedback from everyone. I am going to, let's see, there were a couple of things. Oh, I do want to share this. You like that? I want to share this because we talked about having conversations and connecting. And if you don't know who Brene Brown is, I would look her up, right? I love all her stuff. and one day we're gonna be besties and we're gonna travel and stuff, right? I'm just saying it out there, right? And that's gonna happen. But she says daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable. How many people believe, right? Just this overall understanding and belief that being vulnerable is weakness, right? But let's kind of like shift the narrative around vulnerability, right? Daring greatly means the courage to be vulnerable, right? When you show up for yourself and when you say that thing, that's courage, right? It means to show up and be seen, to ask for what you need, to talk about how you're feeling, to have the hard conversations. And that is what is going to lead to growth, right? For yourself and for the students that you serve and support. With that, I do want to share this resource slide. So you can scan this and save this to your phone. And then I'm going to have a feedback slide for our virtual attendees, as well as those of you who are here, because I want to hear your feedback. It's an anonymous survey. Just want to hear some thoughts as far as your takeaways from this. But before I go to that, scan this QR code, grab the resources here. I always like to share it's best to have the resources and not need them than to need them and not have them, even if it means just saving it on our phone or whatever, and if ever we need it. So also you're gonna have these slides. So even if you don't get the resources, I'll make sure you get it. With that, here is our survey form.